there's two main reasons for that. And since you're talking stats, Jill, I also want to share that this is so uncomfortable to do. It's not something that comes naturally to many of us. Nobody wakes up saying, wow, I'm going to get up and I'm going to ask for a raise. This feels good. It feels downright scary. So much so, there was a survey by Robert Half, the executive search firm, and they said 32% of people would rather clean their home than negotiate salary. And I've even heard 7% would rather get a root canal than negotiate their salary. So this is genuinely not fun. It's the opposite of fun. And there are three main reasons for that. I'm going to say the main reason for this is fear. Fear. And there's three types of fear. I want to distill this a little bit. The first fear we have when we're walking into this is that I don't want to ask them, what if they don't like me? What if they think I'm greedy or money-minded? The second fear we have is, what if they say no? And then what? And the third fear we have is, what if they take the offer away because I tried to negotiate and that turns them off? Then I don't have a job anymore. So this is classically the reason. And I can sort of address each of these. They're definitely, I would say, with absolute confidence, they're not justified. So the first one, they won't like me. Actually, let's say the more senior the role, let's say you're going into something in purchasing, procurement, sales, business development, you tend to, you need good negotiation skills to do well and to thrive and to have a large team, senior management roles. So the fact that you're standing up for yourself, 81% of recruiters and hiring managers end up respecting you a little bit more. So I'm going to say the opposite. The opposite is more true. Like, doesn't it happen and they're like, wow, she's like this on the other side of the table. I can't wait to bring her on. What is she asking? Exactly. And we're like, what is she asking? How much more? Give it. I want her on my team. So that's the first thing. So that's not always true that they won't like me. The second one is, what if they say no? So by default, if you don't ask, the answer is no, right? So it tends to be a good thing, even if they say no, and how you approach it, that relationship, it is definitely worth it, because the status quo by default is that you're not going to get that anyway. So you got nothing to lose is what I'm saying. You sometimes have to ask for it, and good things are on the other side of asking. Beautiful things, And the third thing, the third fear, which I said, was they'll rescind the offer. This is super rare, first of all, when a company rescinds an offer. So, a pandemic, a global economic crisis, those roles are no longer open, they'll rescind the offer. But how often do you hear of someone saying, I tried negotiating, especially women, and they'll be like, they didn't like that. They thought I came across as too aggressive and they took the offer away. Very, very unlikely of that, a chance of that happening. And if it were to happen, Jill, because you tried to negotiate and they took the offer away, I can tell you, you might have dodged a bullet. Because if that's what they like and you haven't even started working with them, what is it going to be like when you're actually inside? Yeah, and we also have to understand why they're asking, because they don't want to waste their time if it turns out you're too expensive. Having said that, everyone knows this is a bit of a game, Jill. Not everyone knows. Recruiters know. They're like, I may not get a straight up, direct answer, and they're okay with that. So some people will say, just put the number that you have in mind. This is my expectation. My way of thinking is, this is like, a video game, Super Mario Brothers. I want you to get as far ahead as possible. Get your foot in the door. Then we'll see. So I prefer not giving a direct number or a range. And if they force you that you have to write something, sometimes, they're very clever now. So they have a text box. So you can say the word negotiable or, I'm open to the right opportunity. Or you can write, if they say, no, you can only put numbers, then I would say just write 0 or write 1. But avoid, because you don't know what their budget is. So if you give a number, you don't know, maybe their budget was 150K and you said 90K would be good. Who knows, you may have left 60K cash on the table. Yeah. The research says that Thursdays and Fridays work better, but I'm a huge fan of Thursday. The reason is, when we are starting the week, our stress levels, it's normal. Our stress levels are very high. There's a lot of demand on us. And as the week progresses, the cortisol level is just automatically going down. And let's say we tend to be in a slightly more giving mood. When someone wants a favor, do not approach them on a Monday morning. You're like, talk to the hand. I'm not listening to you right now. I haven't even had my Monday morning coffee, forget it. But the reason I like Thursday is because in some cases, it may not be so straightforward, right? It may be like, there's a little bit of back and forth going on. So if it's not super duper complicated, it can be finished by Friday. And the hiring manager or the recruiter or the VP of HR, they celebrate. I was in these teams and we'd be like, high five. They signed. Oh my gosh, I can celebrate before my weekend has actually begun. So Thursday sort of gives you that. And my bonus tip here is Thursday after lunch is even better. So, you don't have a hangry person who's looking at you like you're between me and my veggie burger on the other side. I think some sort of a poker face helps. And as opposed to going directly and saying, wow, this is really low. Really? Is this what I'm worth? Really? So emotions are not your friend here. So you do want to play it as cool as a cucumber. And I have a 4-step process to sort of think about how to approach this. The first one is always come from appreciation. So gratitude, because for someone to have made this offer for you, they have gone through multiple sort of hoops, got signatures, that person was on holiday and those approvals. So finally you're like, hey, I know this took a while and it was a little bit complicated. Thank you so much for putting this together. I am so excited about this opportunity. So start with that. Always start on positive. So please, thank you, the goodwill. The second I would say is clarify. Even if you think you know everything. So there'll be a page in front of you. These are the terms. We're always interested in the money line. What is that? So this says this is 95K annually plus 20% bonus. Is that correct, Jill? Jill says yes. Okay. So you know this, but you're still sort of buying time. The third thing you want to do is you want to explain your stance. And you want to use, if you can use data, or you can say, so, based on my research of the market, Jill, the number I had in mind was closer to 110K. So now I'd like to ask you, is this flexible? Do we have a little bit of leeway? Because I am really excited to start. So this 4-step process, ACEA, I'm a fan of acronyms, ASEA, appreciate, clarify, explain, and ask. And then silence, stop talking. No explaining, over-explaining and getting defensive, it can hurt you. Yeah, and the reason for the blunder, I think some people will relate with it, is because I was out of work for a little while. So my confidence was at an all-time low. So the fact that someone made an offer, I was so flattered that they considered it, and I was like, I signed on the spot. So that's the one mistake. The second mistake is, honestly, Jill, not negotiating. Because you think you're going to bother someone. It's going to be a bother. I don't want to ruffle these, a few feathers here, so let me not do it. So that extra 30K, 40K, 50K, whatever that is, can make a huge difference to your quality of life, childcare, maybe a car, whatever. It's peanuts for those guys. So it's definitely worth making the ask. The second mistake, I think, is, when we go in, but we're not armed with information, research, anecdotal, experiences from friends, friend of a friend who's a recruiter, someone who works at Corn and Ferry. This is like the market surveys these days. Oh, what does the median look like? Because without that, you're kind of throwing spaghetti on the wall. And when people ask you about, expectations or anything, you might be pricing yourself out of the market sometimes, and that can hurt you a lot, or you're nowhere near the ballpark. So it's definitely worth a couple of hours getting your handle, like a little bit more on that data, so that when someone says something, you're like, yeah, so, based on roles that I have been approached for, I tend to see positions in the range of 150 to 175K. How does that sound to you? When you say that, you come across as a lot more confident, you can back it up, knowledgeable. And I've even had clients tell them, hey, have that spreadsheet. If you have a graph or something, take it with you to the negotiation. That's like your little, your little brief, your little folder. And they want to see that. And it's hard. The not being emotional, it's hard. It's hard to detach. But just like, getting a nice juicy six-pack, you don't get it overnight. You work at it and it is worth the effort. And then one day you will be like, wow, actually, I'm not that attached whether they say yes or no. Of course, that number would be nice. But regardless, what is the best thing I can do right now? I can have more leads. I can control that. Let me have more leads. So I'm not attaching my entire self-worth and identity to whether they gave me this number, because that's too much pressure on one person. The most popular time to ask for a raise tends to be around the performance review cycles in most companies. And Jill, when we talked earlier about why don't people ask, and the number one reason is fear and discomfort. So if you put yourself in the shoes of the boss, of the manager, and the person in your team says, hey, I think I deserve more, and what do you think about that? So the manager doesn't want to say no to you. They want to see you happy, and they want to be your champion and your sponsor. But no one I know likes to be blindsided. No one likes to be ambushed like that. Like out of the blue, this request has come. You're like, where does that leave the manager? Because the manager is, at least in a good, healthy relationship, the manager is on your side and they want to make it work. So what I recommend doing instead is saying, hey, Miss Boss, Mr. Boss, I see that in December 2025, I see my career path progressing like this, and I see myself as a senior network engineer, whatever that is. And what do you think about this? And these are some ideas of skill sets that I think I have, that I'm strong at. And what else could I be developing? So, making it a collaborative exercise, the boss will be like, that's a really good question. And if you work hard and you're known by the right people and you're ambitious, in the famous HR 3x3 talent development matrix, you want to be that person that comes under the high potential sort of upper L. You want to be known in that sort of circle again and again. So if the manager says, yes, I agree with you, and you're like, okay, can we have milestones for every 90 days? So we check in. So there's not like this sort of crescendo building up towards end of year, and then suddenly this request comes, because they can't say yes to you and then they feel bad. And nobody wants to feel like that. Everybody wants to leave a performance review, both sides feeling good about it. So I recommend build a case and make it a collaborative effort, work hard at it together. And if you're going anywhere off track in the middle of the year, better to know in June than December and then get disappointed and then, rage apply and then, leave.